Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel and happy Tumbler Tuesday. Today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how I created this super cute 3D Patina Gnome tumbler using poly clay. Alright, let's get started. So today we are using Craft Smart polymer clay from Michaels. This is your oven bake clay. You want to make sure you're following the directions to the manufacturer's package. I went ahead and purchased this in the color white. Next, I went ahead and picked up this clay gun. It is actually an extruder. This one was pretty good. It was cheap. It was about $15 at Michaels. I had to make sure that it had the piece with the multiple circles in it. Then I went ahead and purchased some clay making tools and then parchment paper. And then I also have a tumbler. This was actually a sublimation tumbler that did not come out right, so I'm going to go ahead and recycle it and use it for this tumbler. You're going to need a sanding block as well and a few other small things that you'll see throughout this video. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a piece of parchment paper down over my table just because there's a lot of glitter and stuff stuck to this table and I don't want it sticking to the polymer clay on my gnome tumbler. So I'm just going to go ahead quickly and unpackage everything and show you the pieces that I'm using. So I'm using the largest piece that has the circles on it. I'm going to break off a large piece of this clay and start conditioning it in my hands and rolling it around, forming the shape of our gnome nose. I like my gnome nose to kind of be more oval with a rounder top to it. Once you get the shape you like, put that aside and start with a new piece of clay and roll this out into a long cylinder shape, kind of like a worm, making sure it's as even as possible. This is going to create the hat that we're going to drape around the nose and towards the back of the tumbler to give us our guideline for where the hat is going to start. Once you have that done, we're going to grab another piece of clay and we're going to start really mushing this up in our hands just to that clay to soften, because we got to fit that into the extruder. So I went ahead and kind of rolled them into thin cylinders, but not as long, and then shoved them in there and then put our metal piece in and started pushing out the strands that it's going to form. So I'm not going to lie, I struggled really bad with this extruder. Like, you can see how hard I am pushing. Like, my fingers are red. Like, I could have sworn that like my fingers were going to snap off at one point. I struggled really hard with this extruder. If you can find the regular larger pasta maker extruder, get that one. I would not suggest purchasing this one unless you are super strong. I struggled with this and my hand, the side of my hand hurt for like 2 or 3 days from pushing on this against like the table. But like I said, I struggled with this. It took me about 3 hours just to get all of the hair or the strands that I needed to make the knitted part of the hat. That took the longest, and I think that if I had a larger extruder, like the pasta one that you can buy at like Walmart or even Amazon for like 15 bucks, it would have been a lot easier. Also, these strands were really, really thin that when I started to twist to create the braiding effect, the strands were just literally sticking together and looked like blobs. Like, they were not coming out as nice as I thought they would be because they were so thin. So it took me a while to get these right, and as you'll see throughout the video, at the top you'll see like a pile forming of like the clay strands that just did not want to cooperate. Once I got halfway through it, you know, the more you do it, the better you get. So I do show a video towards the end of this showing you again, once I was able to get the strands to cooperate, how you want to roll those. So again, guys, I do apologize. This video was 4 hours long by the time I was done, and I had to like chop it down to at least a 30-minute video for you guys. So you're going to kind of see it on the faster side, but I hope that I get the key points to teaching you that you need to know to make this exact tumbler. So if you have any questions, please make sure you leave them in the comments below. Or even if you have any tips and tricks on how to make this a lot easier, if you have a different tool that would work better. But all I know is that I would not purchase this tool again, and I probably won't use it again. I'm going to actually purchase the larger spaghetti extruder to make this top part of the hat. There is a YouTube tutorial out there from the Salted Thorn Studio, who is the original creator of this gnome design. She shows you how to make the knitted part of the hat, the nose, the brim of the hat, the hands, and the buttons. I'll make sure I list her YouTube tutorial in the description box as well, so you guys can head on over there and watch how she does it. So all I'm doing is making a few strands at a time, twisting them, and then I'm applying them to the tumbler in straight rows, making sure I connect it to that bottom rim of that hat, and then I am stopping a little bit from the top and cutting it off, so this way I can blend that out towards the rim, so this way the lid will fit nicely. You're just going to make your way all the way around the tumbler, making sure you keep it in a straight line as possible, and making sure you don't smush that clay down too much, because then you're going to lose that knitted braided effect. So you're just going to keep on going around that tumbler until you fill it up completely. I don't know exactly off the top of my head how many strands that I had to do. Like I said, it took me a few hours. Okay, so when you make these, you're going to take 2 strands and you're going to start to twist them to the left. I found out easy that if you kind of dangle the strands above your workspace, they don't actually retangle underneath what you're doing. So I was finding out that when I was twisting the top, the bottom was twisting as well, and it was like stretching out my clay. So leave your clay dangling off of the table and use your fingers and kind of shift moving the clay strands upwards and twisting. So you want to take your first 2 strands and you're going to turn to the left. Then you're going to take your other 2 strands, you're going to put those together, and you're going to twist them to the right. So when you put these both together, they're going to cause or form that braid look effect. Once you have those done, you're going to go ahead and put them next to each other, and you're going to gently squeeze them together but not smushing them, and it's going to give you that braided knitted effect. And then you're just going to go ahead and keep applying that to your tumbler until it is done. So once you are done creating the knitted part of your hat, I kind of go in and just fill in any gaps with some random pieces of clay. And then I go ahead and I just make sure I push that down, making it look like the knitted portion of the hat is connected to the rim. And then I just take my little squeegee tool here and I just push that lining of the rim of the hat up towards the knitted portion, just to make sure that everything is conjoined together, so this way when we bake it, we don't have any cracks or pieces looking separated. Okay, so for this next part, I'm just taking my finger and pinching a little bit of the top part of the knitted part of the hat, and I'm smushing that polymer clay into the siding of that tumbler just to give it that good adhesion and really lock that poly clay onto the tumbler. So this way when we bake it, it bakes onto it and not kind of like sitting on the tumbler where you have gaps, because that could actually potentially cause the tumbler to crumble when you remove it from the oven, or not have that adhesion bond to the tumbler, and you could get epoxy in between your clay and your tumbler and it could just be a hot mess. So you really want to make sure that you're causing that seal with that polymer clay to the actual tumbler, and this is going to do that, and it's also going to make it look like it's a finished hat, and it's not going to be super bulky at the rim where your cup lid is not going to fit. So once you go ahead and do that, just make sure it's nice and smooth all the way around. Now we're going to go ahead and take two smaller balls of clay, condition them in our hand, and we're going to roll them into even sized balls. And I'm just using the palm of my hand and flattening them out. I didn't buy a circle cutter from Michaels, but I just used the end of my little rolling clay pin and just kind of use that as a cookie cutout. These are going to be the buttons, so I didn't need anything too big, just something that was, I want to say these are probably a little bit bigger than a dime, but not as big as a nickel size. And I use the end of my little tool there and I poke the 4 holes, so this way we can go ahead and create our lines later on once we epoxy our tumbler. Next, we are going to go ahead and start working on our hands. So we're going to go ahead and take 2 larger pieces of clay and we're going to form 2 more balls, and we're going to go ahead and flatten those out with the palm of our hands. Want to make sure that your pieces are even. Then I'm going to take my little knife tool and I'm going to cut 3 slits almost in like a triangle peace sign figure, and this is going to give us the 4 fingers we need for our gnome hands. And I'm just going to go ahead and separate them a little bit and use my tool here and just kind of smush around and shape my little gnome hands. Once your gnome hands are created, you want to make sure that they're even and set those aside. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start designing our pumpkin. However, I did make my pumpkin and the hands a little bit too big for this tumbler, but I think it still turned out great in the end. However, if you would like to see more of your gnome beard towards the end, the bottom of the tumbler, make sure you make your hands and your pumpkin, or whatever piece that you want to put that your gnome is holding, make sure you make it a little more scaled to the tumbler to leave yourself more room for the beard. Once you're happy with the way your pumpkin looks, go ahead and transfer that to your tumbler. Went ahead and applied my hands on top of my pumpkin, making sure I push those into the pumpkin and into the tumbler to lock in that adhesion. So this way it's not falling off. Then I'm going to go ahead and plop this in my Black & Decker oven at 250 degrees for 15 minutes. Once he was all baked, I went in with ivory spray paint, brown, orange, yellow, black, blue, gray, and a little bit of white, and started painting my gnome. Once the orange part of my hat was done, I went back in multiple times with different layers of different shades of orange, some white, some beige, just to give him some dimension to the knitted part of his hat. You don't have to do that, it's totally optional, but for me, this was the style that I was going for. So now it's time to create our outline for our beard. However, I couldn't get it to work with a pencil, so then I went ahead and moved into using a highlighter. However, the highlighter worked really, really well, but you just got to be careful because it does smudge when you start to paint. But like I said, after a few coatings of the white paint, you couldn't see those yellow lines anymore. So I went ahead and just did a quick draft of where I wanted his beard to go. Then I went ahead and I mixed in some blue paint, and I just painted the outline around the beard and then the rest of the body, just so this way it would give me that structure, shape, outline of where my beard was going to be, as I couldn't see it with the white versus the white. So I went in with this really pretty palish blue. I love orange and blue for the colors of fall. Like, my house is very it's boho, but it's also got like a Ray Dunn vibe to it, but it's also got farmhouse. So like, this color scheme is like perfect. It's my favorite color scheme for fall. So this is why I chose to do these colors for this tumbler. But like I said, you could do it any colors that you want. I would love to see if you guys recreated him and see what colors you guys chose to do for him. But for this one, I stuck with orange and blue. Now you can actually see the beard outline for what I was going for. Now I have something to work with. Now I'll go in and I will touch up my pumpkin in some spots while that dries. And then we'll go back in and we'll paint the beard and just finish up some of the painting, and we'll move on to the next step. Once he is finished, it is time to put him on our turner. I'm going to go in with these Art Time metallic paints. I'm using copper, bronze, gold, and I don't remember the other colors, but I'll post them in the description box below. I purchased these from Michael's, and I'm just going on with my dry brush, and I'm just brushing on some of that paint, making it look more rustic and patina. Once I'm done with that, I will go ahead and let this dry for about 20-30 minutes before we go in with our final layers of epoxy. Now that he's dry, I'm going in with 30 milliliters of my SPEEDY PETEY Fast Set epoxy, and I'm really working my epoxy into the crevices of the knitted portion of the hat, making sure that I don't have any pooling around the buttons, around that rim of where his hat forms, making sure also that I don't have any pooling up and around the crevices of his nose, in between his fingers, or around the outer portion of the pumpkin. You just want to make sure that you don't have excess pooling in some spots on your tumbler, because it can create a lot of air bubbles. Once my epoxy was dried, I went in with a Sharpie metallic marker, went ahead and tested on the bottom of my tumbler just to make sure it would wipe off if I needed to start over, outlined his beard and added in any As you can see how easy it is to remove that Sharpie marker with acetone and alcohol. Just go through, take your time. If you make any mistakes, wipe it away and start again. I let that dry for about 30 minutes, then went ahead with my final layers of epoxy using SPEEDY PETEY, and he was done. Y'all, I was so happy with the way that he turned out. He's perfect. I love the colors. He was so much fun to make. Like I said, this was the first time I ever made a gnome tumbler, and I absolutely love it. If you guys loved this tutorial, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to our channel for all of our future tutorials. Again, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.